Yay, I'm live for another collapse broadcast. Welcome. And if you can hear me, if you can let me know, I would love that. Really appreciate that. So I've plugged in my speaker. Hi. Hello, Noelia. How are you doing? All good. Excellent. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. So, welcome to Collapse Broadcast. I'm Judy van Niekerk, known online as Judy V. And I'm not here, this is important, I'm not here to teach anything. I'm here to name what's already failing and remove it. That's what I do. This isn't coaching, it isn't mentoring, and it isn't another optimization cycle. It is deletion. That's what we do. So what we're going to look at today is, and this has been interesting because I've been talking about it more and more recently, and I'm seeing it more, and it's becoming more prevalent. And even this week, I saw a post in a women's group that was exactly this topic that I'm going to speak about today. And on that post that she made, there were like almost 300 comments. Almost every woman saying, "That's me. I recognize me in it." There were a few other issues, but that's for another day. People understand their patterns, and even with the understanding, nothing changes. That's the essence of what that post was about. And every woman just about was agreeing with her. And nothing changes. You know it, you see it, but nothing changes. Why? Done all the work in all the ways, but nothing changes. The missing variable here is rooting. Because you already know the patterns. That's not the issue. You can name them, you can explain them, you can trace them back to childhood. You can label them as trauma, beliefs, attachment, identity, nervous system. You can appropriate it to self-worth or visibility, fear, control, identities. You see it all clearly, but yet you still repeat them. And that should have broken the old model by now. Because if awareness were the mechanism, a lot more people would be free. If explanation were the mechanism, a lot more people would be living very different lives. If insight were the mechanism, the pattern would end the moment it became conscious. But that's not what people are living. What people are living is they know the pattern. They can describe it in detail. Hello, guys. Thank you for joining. Lamora, Meg. They know the pattern. They can describe it in detail. They have a language for it and support around it. And spent years looking at it, and not to mention a lot of money. And the same behavior still appears. The same chaos and crash still appears. The same loop repeats. The same sabotage still appears. The same hesitation. The same over-checking, softening, bracing. The same money fragility. The same relationship loop. And the same over and over and over again stop-start pattern. The same self-betrayal under pressure. So at some point, the honest conclusion has to be made. The problem is not that you do not understand yourself enough. The problem is understanding is not the mechanism generating behavior. Understanding is not the mechanism generating behavior. And that is where the psychology first, insight-based model of change starts failing in public. Because it keeps telling you that change will come through deeper interpretation, deeper story, deeper wound, deeper belief, deeper healing, regulation, identity, meaning. And yeah, sometimes the interpretation does shift. But the thing is, that's where the model becomes self-perpetuating, is in those sometimes interpretation does shift. Because every single time the pattern returns, you are taught to assume there is still more to understand, still more work, still more healing, still more interpretation. So the return of the loop is not treated as evidence that the model failed. It is treated as evidence that you have not gone deep enough yet. You see how that keeps you in the loop. And after enough years of that, people stop questioning the model and they start questioning themselves. And that keeps the addiction to understanding alive. And all of that can feel like movement, while the same structure keeps reproducing itself underneath. And sometimes the patterns, they return exactly as it was and always has been, but sometimes it returns more refined. Or as I say sometimes, same identity, just a different costume. But refinement is not rupture. It's still the same system producing the same life. You know more about the pattern, maybe, but you're still living inside its architecture. And that's one of the things that struck me about the post in this group, where this woman was explaining and sharing that she had sees all the patterns, spent an enormous amount of money over the past 5 years, I believe it was, and yet they keep repeating. And whilst there were like almost 300 comments responding to most people saying, I do it myself, I see it, I could have written this myself, all of whom are spending money and time and effort on the model of change, transformation. And yet there was so much offers or suggestions. Do this, do that, do the other. But it's all still inside the same architecture, creating a shift, but with a different costume. And that is where the exhaustion starts. Even though you've done all the things in all the ways, it's not because you've done nothing, because you've done so much and the loop is still there. And this is where the work stops feeling hopeful, which in itself is an issue, and starts feeling personal. And this is the part that people are not seeing. A person can sound transformed and still root the same way. A person can understand themselves deeply and still root the same way. A person can have language for the loop and still remain organized by it. This is because the interpretation may have changed while generation remained intact. And once that is seen, what we typically know as transformation work starts to reveal its limitations. Because it can produce better self-description without producing behavioral freedom. This is not a small flaw in the old model. This is a failure point. Psychology describes behavior. It does not fully explain its generation. And most modern self-help, healing, coaching, transformation work still operate inside the same psychology-first frame. They may use a different language, different methods, different identities for the work, but the underlying assumption is often the same. If the person can understand, process, regulate, or reframe deeply enough, the behavior will finally change. As I said, sometimes interpretation changes. Sometimes relief appears. Sometimes you feel temporarily different. But behavior often remains under pressure. Like, take something very simple. You know you do not need to check that email again before you send it. And you still check. Because behavior is not primarily generated at the level of explanation. It is being generated at the level of rooting. And this is the missing variable. And once you see it, a huge amount of modern healing, coaching, self-development, trauma work, and behavioral work begins to look structurally incomplete. There's value in the description, but description is not generation. If you mistake description for generation, you keep intervening at the wrong place. You keep trying to change the story while the system that produces behavior keeps firing. You keep trying to create change through awareness while the body is still routing the same signals through the same pathways under the same conditions. So you become more informed, but not necessarily reorganized. The routing through the system remains the same, where the behavior is actually being generated. So the pattern keeps returning, no matter how well it's named, understood, processed, or worked on. And after years of that, something else starts collapsing. And I witnessed it in this group this week. She named it. And it's not just money that collapses, or confidence, or love, or health, all of which was named in this post. It's trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in change. Trust in work, in reality. Because once someone has been told for years that awareness should change them, every repeated loop starts to feel personal. So they start to think, maybe I'm resisting, or maybe I'm blocked, maybe I'm afraid of success, or addicted to struggle, or maybe I don't want it enough. Maybe I'm still wounded. Maybe I need more capacity or more healing. Maybe I just need one more breakthrough. Can you see the loop? But often, the more accurate conclusion is so much more simpler. The intervention point was wrong. The work kept happening downstream from the generator. And this is why people can understand themselves and still be governed by the same life. This is why people can have years of insight and still produce the same output. This is why awareness so often becomes another layer of management, self-management, more self-management, more self-regulation, instead of the end of the loop. So I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say this lots over the coming weeks. Human behavior is a signal routing phenomenon, not primarily a psychological one. That doesn't mean that psychology sees nothing. It means psychology does not go far enough. Because behavior is output, it is not origin. And the Codex system begins from a different premise. The body is not primarily a story-making machine. It is a routing system. It's where signal routes, physiology responds, behavior emerges from that, and interpretation follows. You stop asking why you still repeat what you understand. You start asking what is still routing the behavior. You stop treating repeated output as a mystery of identity, and you start looking at the system producing it. And you start seeing the actual failure of the old frame. It keeps trying to produce behavioral freedom without changing the system producing the behavior. And that is why so much work does not hold. That is why people can feel better and still not move. And also why people can speak beautifully and still betray themselves in action. And this is why they can know and know and know and still remain inside the same structure. It's got nothing to do with intelligence. It's got nothing to do with capacity. And it has nothing to do whether you've done enough work. The issue is that explanation is not reorganization. Because if behavior is being produced through rooting, then the real question is no longer, what does this pattern mean? The real question becomes, what is generating it? That's the break. And that is where my work begins. Not with meaning, not with coaching, not with healing, not with personal development, and not with a better story about the same loop, with generation, with structure, with rooting. The Codex system is a structural model of human function. It addresses what generates behavior, not just what describes it. So if you can understand pattern and still live inside it, understanding is not the mechanism. If awareness has increased and the output has not fundamentally changed, awareness is not the mechanism. And if you can name the loop and still obey it, then naming it was never enough. As I've said, the missing variable is rooting, and that's where the old model ends, and this is where the Codex system begins. And that is the work that we do inside the Cosmic Tribe. It's not generic group work. It's structural work based on how your system is actually rooting. Because people do not all stabilize the same way. They do not all root the same way. They do not all distort the same way. They do not all repeat patterns for the same structural reason. And this is why entry for the Cosmic Tribe always now begins with a structural review, so that I can see how your system is organized, where the pattern is being generated, and what needs to be addressed first. The structural review is not a discovery call. It's not a genetic or generic advice. It is the point where your specific rooting is seen properly and precisely, so the work can be precise for you from the start. So if you are done understanding the pattern and ready to address what generates it, begin with a structural review. And that's the front door into the Cosmic Tribe. So some new concepts brought up here. You may need to go back over it. But there will be a part of you that will lean into this and notice how your body responds to this. That will be key. I will leave the link for the structural review in the description after we end this call. Thank you for joining me. And I will be doing a deep dive into this topic in a couple of weeks' time, and I'll be sharing the link shortly. If you would love to get access to that, just let me know in the comments, and I will share it with you when it is released. It'll be sometime in the mid-April. Be a deep dive into rooting. What is it? Okay. Have a great day. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time.